I'm back. I've got clean water. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be using on this palette, this is, like I said, this is what most people start off with, the Winsor and Newton little palette. So I'm going to actually put some little bits on here for the background. So I want oranges, yellows, so I'm all prepared to do the picture. So if I just put it again onto there, you can see how bright that one is. So this, because this is a completely different version, to make it easy, I'm going to just do a little mixture of, like I said, the yellows for the background. So I'll put quite a little bit of yellow on here, making sure it's nice and wet. Then I will put in a little bit of an orangey colour. I'll put that one on there because I don't need it, it mustn't be too dark, because I want it to be enough to put poppies on to show. And then there's a little unusual colour, sort of like a mustardy colour, so I'll put that one in there. And a little tiny bit of a green, because I won't want anything too green. There, I'll put a little bit of green on there, but I'll mix it with a couple of different greens, so that is a lot wishy-washy on there. All right, so you can see it is pretty wet because I don't want it to be too neat and tidy. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, really and truthfully, I need to use my bigger brush. But what I'm going to do is, just to give it texture, I'm going to just use one of my little fan brushes. I'm going to damp it in, and I'm going to use this very unusual colour. And now I'm going to just basically try and put some of this colouring in this background, because this is like going to be a bit of a base for the back. I don't mind it having like the little lines on it, because you'll see as I go along, this is just sort of like slightly layering for the, because if you think that this is like a field with poppies, and I would normally do this stage afterwards, but I'm going to use this brush a few times today on there. You can see I've managed to get some little blobs on, but that is perfectly fine. I'm now going to use this bigger brush for the bottom section, which I want to be a bit more yellowy and greeny, and I'm now going to just go across on here and mix this, make it nice and wet, because of this is again my layering. And I'll put a tiny bit of green on there, there we go. So it's building up. We don't want it to be too brighter colours, because I want to make sure we can see all the little lines of the poppies on top. And there we go. That's a lovely little backdrop that'll be on there. And as I said previously, this is how you want it. It's not to do with anybody else. You do the colourings how you want. Looking across here, again, that's really, really good that it's got its own sort of depth. I'm happy with that. There, very, very wet. It doesn't have to be as wet as that, but I want to get my colours in. There we go. There, that's the next stage. Right, so now I've got to start making it look with a bit more depth and a little bit more colour. As we all know, in the distance, you wouldn't be able to see your poppies, but what I like to do is I want to give it just a few little deeper colours, because I don't want it to be able to be seen too much. So I'm going to just put some little bits of the darker green in little patches, because what would happen in the distance, you wouldn't quite see what's going on out there. So, but I want to make sure it's still got quite a nice little bit of white too, so it's not completely straight. So I'm going to bring up the dirty sort of colour into that, because I don't want it to look too neat. There we go. That's giving that more depth. As I said before, there's no right way or wrong way. People are probably watching me and thinking, oh God, why is she doing that? But that's the way it is. Okay, so now I've got the two sort of slightly different colours. I've got a bit of that reddy sort of colour, which I'm going to put like little tiny little patches, because I want that to bleed in, because I want that to be as if it is patches of poppies. And I will put more intricate bits in, but I just want some of the colourings in the background, so it's like there, that'd be nice. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to put some poppies in. Now, poppies, of course, would be a really lovely red, wouldn't they, at the front, because they'd be in full view. If you can see me making up this different colouring. Now, that's a bit too pink, so if I add this red here, that again is too pink. So I think if I add a little bit of the orange, yeah, with a bit of the orange, that looks like a poppy colour, doesn't it? Because poppies aren't true on there. Okay, so let's have our first little squidgy little poppies for the front. See what I'm doing? Like we did the unusual poppies previously, the little wet ones. This will only be my start. Okay, I'll put some on the edges. Then when the actual painting's finished, like finalised, they'll all be done much neater. This is just, so now, because I've got that nice colour, this is why I'm going to just put like little tiny bits. I will need a much smaller brush. I'll probably use that little tiny one, because I want to just put some little tiny weeny little flecks everywhere. Really, really tiny. Because in a distance, they would be really, really tiny, wouldn't they? Okay, see it all coming along there. And they'd be in patches. If you looked in the distance and you saw loads of poppy, like the fields, they wouldn't all be neat and tidy. They'd be all sort of like random little sections everywhere. Okay, I'm just doing some more little gradual little bits and pieces. And then of course as you get to the nearer the front, they would get bigger and bigger. And we would then have to make them look like proper poppies. But at the moment we haven't got any of the greenery on, because we didn't need that yet. But of course the foreground would have lots of little patches of like grass, weeds. But I just like getting a little bit of a wet look, so we know that we have actually got lots of these poppies are going to be in this area. Okay, so I'm going to just show you how this is building, so you can see the depth of the actual background, and now you can see the colours on the foreground, and now we're going to start putting in the greenery. So like I said, this is like a small version which I did yesterday just to have a little practice on, so that the main one of course is much neater and nicer, because that was done it took ages to do. So again, now I think it's time for me to actually put on lots and lots of little greenery. Then I know I've got my depth on here. Right, again mixing a few different colour greens, because I don't want the foreground to be too bright. And I can add in yellows and browns. Yeah, got a nice browny colour there. If I mix in some dirty green, because everything wouldn't be a bright green, would it? Right, so what I'm going to do now, because this is going to be, there's going to be lots and lots of like little tiny little lines, but I want the wind to be coming across, so literally all my grass at the front lines will all be coming across this way, because I want it to be movement of grass. Of course we don't need all these big ones, we need to go little tiny ones. So now I'm going to just do some weeny tiny ones. This is where you got your the therapeutic bit now, because you're literally going to just like little tiny little brush strokes and just do wherever you want them to be. But we want them to go to the almost the first line, but in a scruffy way. And then we change the colour, we put a bit more yellowy bits in, because we just want it to be random and a little bit messy, but to show that there is a foreground. And I'm just messing it all across here. But before we finish, we then have to make all the front ones look really close in on there. And of course from the side we would have more. And I am painting on the masking tape, because that, when it gets pulled off, it will give it a really good look. And I can see here there's a little bit, and the background is almost white, and we don't want that, so we'll be putting some bits on there to bring that in. Okay, so if you look now, just seeing a little bit more movement on there. Okay, so now I will be putting just a little bit more colour underneath, a little bit of this green and that, because there we go, I'm going to just put patches of the green. I could be using a bigger brush, but I'm quite happy showing you with this. And again, just splodgy bits to bring it all in. I will now change to this brush. And what I'm using now is the dirty sort of colours left of on the actual palette, and I'm just like mingling them in, because we don't want it all too light underneath. But again, it will give lots of depth, and it's however you want to put your green on. I better turn this off and put the next video on, otherwise there won't be enough storage.